about, I guess about 15 years ago, I'm looking at a comic book, and I grew up on comic books, and I'm suddenly looking at an ad for, I guess it was a Red Ryder Daisy BB gun, Daisy's Red Ryder BB gun. And I looked at this, and all of a sudden I made this connection that here were all of these kids who were reading comic books all through their youth in which there were ads for guns, which made them sort of pre-members of the NRA. And I thought, this is probably not a good thing. So I called a woman who was then the president, she still is, the president of DC Comics, Jeanette Kahn, and I suggested to Jeanette that she might want to drop these ads, that it was not a good thing. Well, these ads were bringing in an awful lot of money for DC Comics and for Marvel and all these other comic companies. But Jeanette Kahn was a responsible person, really, really bright, and she thought to herself, yes, he's right, this is not a good thing. And they killed the ads. They killed the ads. Away went gun ads. And Marvel followed soon after. Stan Lee went in and talked to the people at Marvel, and they said, we can do without this money. Let's go for ads with other products. And this, I thought, was a very responsible thing. Now, that's 15 years ago. But now we come to today. We come to today, and if you could just dolly in on this, this is the current issue of Night Thrasher Comics from Marvel. And if you will look at this ad, you will see the ad says, yes, that is a gun in our package, and we are happy to see you, which, of course, is a play on the old Mae West line, is that a gun in your pocket, or are you just happy to see me? But look at the size of that gun in this double-page spread. Here is a video game with a gun in it. Can you dig it? It is a gun. We are going to give guns to children so that they'll be all ready when they go out into the streets to buy a real gun. People are talking about banning this stuff. They don't talk about banning real guns, so they want to ban this stuff. I find this really reprehensible, really ugly. I think the video game manufacturers, to whom I lectured about a year ago. I was the guest speaker at the Video Game Designers Conference, and they hated me. I told them that they were a bunch of violent mothers, and they didn't like that. In fact, it got me an editorial in, I don't know, Video Wazoo magazine, you know, the magazine of the industry. And they said that I was a Johnny-come-lately, and how dare I say such things, that they're not really violent, that the show, that the game that has the what's it called, Wolfenstein, with the Nazis in the underground chambers, and you kill them and you shoot them. All of this was good, healthy fun for kids. Now, all of a sudden, here comes the U.S. government, and it says, you got a violent industry there, and someone's going to have to rein you in. So quick like a bunny, they run and they put their own kind of rules out. We'll do this and we'll do that. You watch, we're going to be different. We're going to be better. We're going to be a lot better. On the day that I'm showing this to you, on the CBS News, I heard about a 7-year-old kid who had taken a gun to school and killed an 8-year-old kid. I wonder where he learned that. This week I want to talk to you about an absolutely wonderful television program that you'll probably never get to see.
Greetings, prisoners of gravity. This is Commander Rick.
It's produced in Canada on something called TV Ontario, and it's called Prisoners of Gravity. Now, many of you will say, oh, I know about Prisoners of Gravity because you've seen it on one or another PBS station over the last year or two. Prisoners of Gravity is an absolutely spectacular show that was started in 1989. In fact, they're just finishing their 5th year. And what happens on this show is that TV Ontario will be doing some sort of a nature show, which I think is called Second Nature. And all of a sudden you get, and they're static, and the next thing you know, the signal has been pirated. And it's been pirated by a guy who's up in the Reality One communications satellite up above the Earth, and it's Commander Rick. And this is a guy who got tired of reality and being a prisoner of gravity here on Earth, so he got into his 1967 Camaro with the homemade booster rocket strapped to the roof, and he just blasted off, and he was going to find, you know, the land of imagination. What happened was that he hit the satellite. And so there he is now, trapped on communication satellite Reality One with 4,000 channels of cable that he can usurp. And every week, he does a wonderful show about science fiction and comics. They've done shows on telepathy, homosexuality, racism, comic book layout, monsters, the retelling of the Frankenstein legend, zero population growth, an entire show on Ray Bradbury, an entire show on Neil Gaiman and the Sandman character, on world building, on families, on war in space. They don't just do interviews, although the interviews are amazing because they get people you've never seen. Douglas Adams, Nick Bantock, the guy who wrote Griffin and Sabine. You never see him in an interview. They've done everybody. They'll do a whole show on the Clarion Writers Workshop, and they'll interview 25 different people who have taught at Clarion. It's a wonderful, wonderful show, and unfortunately, we don't get it down here.
The first 8 issues of The Sandman are collected in the graphic novel Preludes and Nocturnes. They explain how a secret society of sorcerers attempt to imprison death.
I urge you, please, to help lobby for it. Let's get Sci-Fi Channel on the beam. Let's get them to get this show, Prisoners of Gravity, here, so that we can enjoy what our neighbors to the north are enjoying. Here we are, a direct lineal ancestor of mine. You'll notice the similarity in the teeth. You know, it's not my my habit to be troublemaking and question things, but I've just been that way ever since I was a kid. When I was very, very little in Painesville, Ohio, they sent in I guess it was a rabbinical student to teach us you know, studies, and here he was telling us about the Bible, and he started off with Adam and Eve and did that whole numbers. I raised my hand. I'm maybe 10 years old, and I raised my hand and I said, let me see if I have this right. There's only Adam and Eve, right? There was only them. They were created by God, and God made Adam and Eve. He said, that's right. And then from them they got Cain and Abel, right? That's right. And there was only the 4 of them. That's right. And so then Cain slew Abel and was driven out of Eden, east of Eden, into the land of Nod, right, where he got married and had children. I said, where'd all those people come from? So they threw me out of school. Now this was when I first began to question the efficacy and the imperturbability of deities. When I learned that Santa Claus actually worked for the CIA, I was heartbroken. I don't want any of your children to be watching this, but you know, of course, that the Easter Bunny is a cross-dresser. And as for the Tooth Fairy, rotten to the core. Now, I will attack at this point one of the great icons of American society. From the time you are born, you believe that Walt Disney and the Walt Disney Organization are the purveyors of absolute magic, the happiest kingdom of all. Well, I have to draw you up short. It finally has gotten to me. It annoyed me when it was Walt Disney's Pinocchio. No, it's not Walt Disney's Pinocchio. Pinocchio was written by an Italian gentleman named Carlo Collodi. Wonderful man. Bambi was not written by Walt Disney. It was written by someone named Felix Salten. 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea was not written by Walt Disney, although it's plastered all over it. It was written by a man named Jules Verne. And in fact, The Three Musketeers, which was a recent Disney film, was not done by Walt Disney. No, Athos, Porthos, and Aramis, D'Artagnan, they were invented by Alexandre Dumas. When Dumas died, he had one of the largest funerals in the history of the world. But if we open this Marvel comic, we see that The Three Musketeers was written by somebody named Bobby J.G. Weiss, which must come as a great shock to Alexander, who was probably spinning like a gyroscope. Disney has been sticking its name on things for 50, 60 years, and they get away with it. They get away with it because nobody ever calls them on it. If they ever say that something was written by somebody else, it's a little itty-bitty line somewhere at the bottom of a film where you never notice it before. Now, I don't want to suggest that Disney is greedy. The Disney Corporation is certainly not greedy. The fact that last year Disney's made $3.7 billion, and that the profits were $622 million, the Disney organization can have the earth. They can own it. They can pave it over and put up all the small worlds they want. Although, if you ask me, just that theme from It's a Small World is enough to make you want to take out an Uzi and shoot them all dead. But they can have all the money in the world. All I ask is that from time to time, they acknowledge that the people who wrote the things are the people who wrote the things, not Disney. I'm a crank. What do you want from me? Yo, take a look at this. You may never see something like this again. This is the Lifetime Achievement Award of the Science Fiction Writers of America. That's the professional organization of science fiction writers. SFWA was founded in 1965. It was founded by Damon Knight, the motivating influence, and its first vice president, that's me. You're looking at him. I resigned in 1977 from SFWA because I couldn't stand any more amateur arguments about what color the club tie should be. They began giving out the nebulas in 1965, but a few years later they started giving out the Lifetime Achievement Award. This Lifetime Achievement Award is the one that belonged to Alfred Bester. It's been entrusted to me, and I'll keep it till there's an Alfred Bester museum or something. The problem with giving it to Alfie was, though he was a great, great writer, Demolished Man, The Star's My Destination. Alfie never lived to get it in his hands. They gave it to him on his deathbed. It was pushed through at the very last moment when he was just clinging to life. And that's what's happened too often to too many great writers in this field. Because there was a rule, a bylaw, a strange, weird rule that somebody put together and said you could only give out 6 Lifetime Achievement Awards every decade. 6 every decade. Why this rule came up, I don't know. I suppose somebody thought it would make the award seem much more valuable, much more mystical. After somebody's been writing for 30, 40, 50 years, it's going to make it more valuable. How about this man? How about Paul Anderson? Here's a man who's been writing since the late 40s, for God's sakes. Here's a man who has written 127 books, Paul Anderson. Paul Anderson is 68 years old. That's a fine piece of age, 68 years old. How about this? Bob Sheckley. Bob Sheckley, one of the most influential writers of the 50s and 60s, a great humorist, a terrific writer. He's a punk. He's only 66 years old. And what about Kate Wilhelm? She's also a punk, 66 years old. Kate Wilhelm, 3 dozen books, each one more brilliant than the last one. Kate Wilhelm, by the way, only one of the 12 people who's ever gotten a Lifetime Achievement Award was a woman. And now we come to the grand old master himself, A.E. Van Vogt, Alfred E. Van Vogt. In 1930s, in the 1940s, if there had been a Lifetime Achievement Award, A.E. Van Vogt would have gotten it before Asimov. He'd have gotten it before Clark. He'd have gotten it before Bradbury. A.E. Van Vogt was one of the most influential and important writers that we had. He wrote Slan. Slan remains today the best book about mutants you've ever read. This kid, Jamie Cross, trying to run away from the purges. And the world of Null-A. Van Vogt brought non-Aristotelian thinking into the genre. He used general semantics as an idea for a novel. The Voyage of the Space Beagle. A.E. Van Vogt was a writer whose work was seminal. He went away in the 50s. He got involved with Dianetics, and he wasn't around for 20 years, and he came back, and he was badly agented, and nobody seems to remember him now. And because he was away and because he was involved with Dianetics for a while, it seems as if no one wants to give him this award. Well, I'm here to tell you, folks, that I've been trying for 2 years to get SFWA to give A.E. Van Vogt the award. And they say, well, Van should get it. Yes, of course, but Paul Anderson hasn't gotten it. Kate Wilhelm hasn't gotten it. Ursula Le Guin hasn't gotten it. What about Bob Sheckley? Yeah, I agree. Paul, Bob, Kate, they ought to have it. Ursula, she's in young, fine fettle. So Silverberg, so are any number of other good writers. This rule, which I understand is no longer even in the bylaws, is something that has hung SFWA up, and it prevents them from doing the decent, humane thing. It's not just that A.E. Van Vogt is very old and very sick and may not be with us for an awful long time. It is that it is his due. He did the work. These people are of an advanced age. If you're going to say to them, we appreciate what you did, if you're going to say we think that you are masters, now is the time to do it. You don't have 2, 3, 5 years to have a popularity contest. Let's give it to Paul this year. Let's give it to Kate next year. Let's give it to Van 4 years down the line. There isn't any time left. There's no time left to do this. I talk to you now, and I'm not making any friends for myself. In fact, I probably have lost for myself the friendship of the outgoing president of SFWA, Joe Haldeman, because I brought this up in a recent banquet and business meeting of SFWA up in Oregon. This was raised, and they couldn't talk about the rightness of doing it, of giving out these awards, of getting rid of the rule, or bending the rule, or putting the rule in abeyance, which you can do. Any rules that people make can be put aside. They're just words. No, they didn't want to talk about that. They wanted to talk about how I was blackmailing them. They wanted to talk about how I was coercing them. And I was warned. I was threatened. They told me, don't go on television with this. You'll only do more harm than good. How much harm more can I do? The awards are not being given. No one's talking about it. Nothing's being done. I'm not asking anybody to put any pressure on SFWA. I'm asking SFWA itself to have a heart. To have a heart and do the right thing. These are awards that are due. No one will argue with that. All that stands in the way are words. Change the words.